welcome Abigail Gibbons here, the host of the WOW series. We are here for one of our final episodes in the first season of our podcast and our interview series. It is such a pleasure to be here with Julia Hunt. She spoke at our previous mental health event that took place this past May in 2021, and she's going to be sitting down with us to share her story. She works as She works as the lead mental health therapist at TIA, which is a fantastic women's health tech company based here in New York that we will share more about who they are and what they do here in our interview. And she's going to be talking with us today, of course, her journey to her role to becoming the lead mental health therapist. And we're also going to be sharing, how we're navigating our mental health in today's world, in today's day and age. And she's, of course, as always, going to end it with her advice for the next generation. So I'm very excited to get our conversation started and to share Julia's advice and story with all of you here today. So without further ado, I'll let Julia introduce herself. Julia, please go ahead and take it away.
Hi, thank you, Abigail. Hi, everyone. I am Julia, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker, but currently working at TIA, which Abigail introduced. And right now, I'm actually currently heading up the mental health services department, and which just means that we have a bunch of lovely therapists. We're growing rapidly. We have about 30, and I said, and growing. And so I do both one-on-one clinical work, and then I also am managing and helping to build out the program. So it's nice to meet you all.
Wonderful. That's so exciting. So many of our WOW series members are like me and like us, maybe they work a corporate job and they have a side hustle, or they're looking to make the jump into the entrepreneurial world or into the startup world. So it's great to have you here. You're like just such a fantastic example of how you can kind of have hybrid roles, and as your journey started as a social worker into what you're doing now at TIA. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what was that journey like to you, like for you, like for you deciding that you wanted to go to school, that you deciding you want to be a social worker, and then ending up at TIA. I'm curious if that was on the agenda to go into health tech, or if it just kind of happened.
Yeah, well, I think, it was definitely a long story, but hopefully a sweet one. So I was actually went to undergrad in the Midwest, and I decided that I wanted to be in New York. And I was in sociology. It was really kind of my back area of study, but I thought I wanted to go into education because I really wanted to do policy and make some real concrete change. But I recognized that in order to start to make some change, talking one-on-one with people on the ground is really important to get a sense of what's going on in the community. So I had some kind of odd jobs here and there in New York City, as we all do, starting very, very fresh in New York City, and then eventually decided to go back to get my master's of social work. It just felt like a great kind of combination of being able to do the social and the clinical work, like really work one-on-one with people, but the perspective that social work brings, I think, to the field, to mental health, and just in general, is very vast and broad. And so it just felt like it fit very, very great. It also has a policy lens if you want. So I really ended up going back to school, and I got into actually the hospital systems in terms of clinical social work. First, I was working in the community. So it was called a preventive program, for any of you guys who know kind of what that looks like. But I had the opportunity, and honestly quite the privilege, to be able to go into folks' homes. And I worked with one-on-one, but also with families. It changed my world in terms of how you're able to understand individuals, but also family dynamics and couples and all of that. And so I think that was really my entrance into wanting to do more therapeutic one-on-one work. I ended up that was the hospital system, but then my next year I ended up doing another internship, just more generally in the hospital. I'll kind of speed forward because I was at the hospital for a while, but I was doing this kind of clinical work. I ended up in transplant, or in living donation, and I loved it. I had the opportunity to really grow within that role over time, and became kind of the senior lead there as well, and helped to build out programs a little bit. And it was incredibly fruitful. But I started to recognize that the hospital system is really, it's kind of archaic in some ways, for a lot of things, right? There's not a lot of change that happens really fast. And so I felt like I was kind of coming to a ceiling to some extent, also in terms of, quite honestly and quite frankly, and something I think we should be talking about more, pay. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to kind of branch out for a number of reasons. And just quickly, I think, I went and I had some conversations with some mentors, and they kept telling me I have to choose between this clinical route and this, like, program development or like director kind of route. And so I was told over and over and over again that I really have to kind of choose one. And I never wanted to choose one, because I think if you're going to be in a role where you're helping to build out and create a program, that you want to have those, like, that clinical kind of lens and be relevant there. And so needless to say, I ended up shifting gears. I wanted to travel for a year, ended up not being able to travel because of COVID for very long. And then so I basically just jump started kind of that next chapter of my career. And I always knew I wanted to go into this world. I think, the startup world, the health tech world is something that is like incredibly there's just innovation that's there. And so I jumped in and quickly kind of was able to grow in that role and continue to grow in that role. And then I think one thing that's most important is now able to combine both of those things. So still get to do the clinical work, but also growing into that more development, program development, and managerial people ops role.
I love that. What a great story. Thank you so much for sharing. And so many of those pieces are relatable, I think, especially to other professionals and other women watching, because one thing you said, which is literally a fundamental reason of why I started the WOW series, was pay, how you navigated those conversations and how you navigated that, because I struggled with that, especially in my early career. And it can be a tough conversation to navigate, and especially when you feel like your voice or work isn't being heard and you have the data to prove why it's there. So a very relatable story, and really a driving reason of why I wanted to have these conversations, so that way we know we're all kind of in this together. We've all had issues navigating our pay, navigating our worth. And then what I also love about what you said are two things. One is how, others were telling you, and I'm sure mentors who you respected and obviously seek guidance from were telling you that you have to pick one or the other, but you listened to your gut and what you knew what was right for you, and kind of waited for that right opportunity, and kind of stuck it out to see what else is out there, which is something that is so important, something I wish I knew as a younger professional, and something that's so important, is you can have the best mentors and the people who are so well intended for what's right for you, but you also know what's best for yourself. And I think as you're navigating your early career in your early 20s, you're also looking to kind of start to trust your gut more, right, and what's right for you than those around you.
And it may be that what you need or what you recognize is important isn't already there, and you have to kind of develop it or create a new space for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's fantastic advice. And then I would love, because I have you here, I would love to ask a little bit about, you shared some great tips with us at our speaker series event. So I would love to talk a little bit about, you particularly shared a lot around boundary setting, and how we can do that. And I know one piece of advice that you gave that I still took back, that you shared with one of the attendees, was that boundary setting can be small. And it doesn't have to be like a big initiative or ask. So I'd be curious, how did you incorporate that, into your own journey when you look to take time off and you look to kind of switch into a different industry? Did you at all have to kind of like, practice what you so often tell others?
Yes, definitely. Not always successfully. And I'm just going to be, straightforward and honest about that. But absolutely. And I think that, a boundary for me was recognizing that I wanted to grow and needed to grow, and that the space that I was in, I had gotten so much, and I'm forever grateful for that. But that kind of my boundary was putting my foot down and recognizing that I needed to shift gears to really find something that was my next step that was important. So I think that that is one of the ways that I was able to kind of create some space or some boundaries for myself.
Mhm.
I think this last year has been a year of trying to figure out how to boundary set when
Yeah.
there are absolutely no boundaries. No boundaries for so many things like work or time, because we have all been, working. The majority of us, many of us, some of us, I guess I should say, have been working from home, and so trying to figure out how to make sure that we're stepping away from our work, stepping away from our computer life, because I think
Mhm.
it really is a whole life that sometimes partners and friends and others around us might not necessarily understand, and they don't always get to be a part of it really at all.
Right.
Whereas maybe if we were in person work events, there might have been some sort of situation where a partner or a friend or something could be involved to some extent. And now it's not really the case. So trying to make sure that I'm pulling apart time for my partners and
Mhm.
my family, and I think most importantly ourselves.
Yeah.
It might be very small, so it might just be like um, which maybe doesn't seem small to everybody, but like cooking a meal for myself.
Mhm. A great
That
one.
quite honestly might be a boundary, or um, something just like putting down the computer. I think that those are all things that we've all kind of tried to do to some extent here and there. Um, and other things I think are just making sure that you are taking time off. You mentioned that, um, you know,
Mhm.
making sure that you're showing up for yourself. I actually have had a lot of conversations with patients about that. How are we showing up for ourselves? And I think that boundaries, small and large, are one ways that we can do that. And it may just be saying no.
Mhm. Absolutely. So important. Thank you so much for sharing that too. And I also like what we mentioned and you talk about as well is kind of boundaries as a form of self-care, like making time for yourself. That is self-care. Also a boundary, you're like, this is my non-negotiable. I'm gonna cook a meal for myself. Something I'm definitely still working on doing more of. And it's just little by little, right? And something that's so important to remember is we don't always do it correctly, but at least we make the effort to try and to be better. So let's get into. With that said, thank you for talking a little bit more about how you've incorporated your own mental health into your own lifestyle. And I'd love to get into our two questions. They're two infamous questions that we ask all of our speakers. The first one is a challenge that you've had to overcome in your career. I imagine we might have touched on it a little bit already, but I would love to hear a bit more about how you've navigated that.
Yeah. So I think it is one of the major kind of things that I have battled. That experience that I talked about, really shifting out of the a world that was very, very secure.
Mm-hmm.
Being in a kind of traditional environment in a hospital system. Um, and having conversations with people who I admired and looked up to, and who might have kind of um, kind of encouraged me to stay, which in some ways, that's kind of nice to have, people say, no, why would you leave? What do you need to kind of stay? But recognizing that it really was time for me to shift gears overall.
Mhm.
Um, in light of that, and I think some feedback that I did get is, you're crazy for quitting and traveling for a year. You're gonna
Mhm.
fall back in your career, right? I'm not going to be able to kind of be in line with others, even just that one year. And I took took a chance, and I trusted, I guess, myself, which took a lot of courage and a lot of years to
Yes.
do. I will say it
Yeah.
absolutely did, but it finally did it and jumped, and it was honestly the best decision that I could have made. And now, in this health tech company, surrounded by women who are CEOs, who are really, kind of forging forward and changing, I feel very strongly, healthcare for people in general, but for women more specifically.
Absolutely. We could get into that too, because I mean, I've of course been looking up a lot about Tia now and seeing how I can get involved. Sidebar, it's like so shocking that something like Tia hasn't existed before. I mean, I'm still struggling. I just want to find a gynecologist that can see me, that's in network. But anyway, that is another topic of conversation because I want to respond to what you just said. And I love that you brought this up because this is a very common theme that we talk about, but your story is also so unique. Often we talk with entrepreneurs who left to start their own businesses and had those similar fears. People ask, what are you doing? Or don't leave, you're leaving the financial security, or like, I support you, but I don't really get it. And I love how your story is that similar idea, but you didn't leave to start your own business. You just left to go into a different sector of the industry that you work in an area that you're curious, that you felt passionate about. And still navigating the doubt of others can be really hard. And because you always, you're like, what if they're right? What if this doesn't work out? But then when you take the leap and you find success and happiness, you're like, you just have like a new sense, I feel like, of trust in yourself, which is so, so important. And I actually took some time off between, I guess, jobs or careers as well. I worked at a magazine for a couple years, and then I took what I'd saved and I left, and I was going to travel for about 6 months. And I totally relate to people being like, you're crazy, and I was like 23 at the time. So it was like, you're too young and what are you doing, leaving your career? And then of course I had people on the other hand say, oh, 23, a perfect time to do this. You're still young. But there, like the anxiety I had until I just went and did it was a tough battle just to continue to trust yourself and trust your intuition. And then looking back, it was such an incredible experience that led to me starting the WoW series. So I think thank you. And so I love your story, and I definitely relate to it. I know other people can too. And I know hopefully for those watching, you can hear Julia's story. And if you are looking to jump into a different industry, I know the pandemic has forced us to reflect a lot on if what we're doing makes us happy. And just know that, you can see through her, she took the time off and followed her gut, and now she's here thriving at Tia. So I would love to hear if you have any other advice related to that. And of course, our final question, just advice in general for the next generation of women, of professionals who are navigating those early stages of their career.
So I think this might hopefully tackle both of them to some extent. And I recognize, we're talking about kind of early stage of career, but I think that sometimes in our early stages of our career, there's so much forethought about what is going to come next and next and next, and trying to kind of plan to set ourselves up to be able to be there and then be able to be there. And if we haven't met this mark, then we might not be able to go there, or whatever that is. And I just want to share my experience. So when I did that, when I ended up shifting gears, I feel like I might be a little bit older. So I was 34, I think 35, 34, 35. And so I just want to encourage, everybody you can shift at any point. And I think that I hope that makes you feel more confident and okay and bold to stand in the decisions that you're making now for the future, is that all things are possible if you really, I think, open up a little bit of kind of this idea of perspective, I realize it is not easy. And there are so many barriers that all of us come against. And especially as being women, especially being women of color,
Mhm.
I think that it's incredibly challenging. So I'm not saying it's just easy breezy by any means, but I think that, be bold and don't be afraid to change, not just once, but as many times as it takes.
Oh my gosh, fantastic advice. Don't be afraid to change, not once, but as many times as it takes. We all need to hear that. Change is something we can all be, can stop us from achieving, our dreams or our goals. And to piggyback on what you said, I often believe that if we do take the risk, if we change ourselves in pursuit of something that we're passionate about, we begin to make the world a better place. Because if you are happy and stepping into your purpose, you're also putting good back into the world and helping others, exactly as you're doing now. So thank you so much, Julia. I wrote down one of my favorite quotes that you just said there, which is stand in the decisions that you're making now. Oh my gosh, I so relate to, just the anxiety, the early 20 something anxiety of like, what do I do with my life? And if I make the wrong decision, my life is going to be over. And, I think so many young women and really all professionals need to hear that and can see the success that you've held. And it is also so empowering too when we talk about some of the challenges we face as women, but as you said, women of color, to hear for other women of color watching, to hear your story and see you and see that you've navigated, the change and the uncertainty and different career transitions, and all in pursuit of what you love to do, is very, not only reassuring, but also empowering to others watching as well. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We will tag Julia below, and if you'd like to reach out to her, get to know more about her or Tia, please feel free to reach out to them, or you can reach out to me and I will connect you to them over email. Julia, are there any other last words of advice, wisdom, or call to action that you have for anyone watching today?
I think I would just maybe leave everyone and myself with just show up for yourself.
Mm.
That's all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. Everyone be sure to check out Tia as well. We'll also have their social handle below, especially if you're based in the New York City area. It's a fantastic organization that we should all be a part of. I'm still learning more about it, so we'll look forward to sharing more with everyone watching there. Julia, again, it was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Abby.